So now that we've set up our conditional access policy to allow only approved applications, we'll now need to look at setting up the man policy. So if we go back to our home screen, we want to look at a function called Intune app protection. So if we go into app protection policies, then we'll create a new policy. And this will be for iOS or iPad, and we'll do a separate policy for Android. So we'll call this iOS policy. Okay, so we'll click next. Target to apps on all device types. Move this one to no. The device must be unmanaged devices. So we look at selecting public apps. Recommendation here would really be just to go through and just basically click everything, but for the purposes of the demo we'll look at the core ones. So we'll select Outlook, we'll select OneDrive, we'll select OneNote, Microsoft Teams, and a really important one to do is SharePoint. So whenever you're looking at things like Teams, just please understand that there is a direct correlation between Teams, Exchange, OneDrive and SharePoint. So just please do bear that one in mind. So for the purposes of this, we'll just select those 5 core applications. There are no kind of public apps. So then we look at the protection. So the ability to back up organisation data to iTunes and iCloud backups will definitely block that. Send org data to other applications. We would look at policy managed apps with open-in or share filtering. Save copies of organised data. We will block that one. Allow user to save copies to selected services. What you must always do is look at configuring SharePoint and OneDrive. So that just means that a user can save data out of the corporate application into one of those 2 applications. Receive data from other apps. You could look at, so that's receiving data from other apps. So that's data that's coming in. Happy if you allowed that to all apps. Restrict, cut, copy and paste between other apps. We would say policy managed apps only. Cut and copy character limit, we wouldn't set. Third-party keyboards we would allow. Encrypt organisational data, again, we'd always require. Sync app with native contacts. This would allow you to sync things like your email, etc. If you've got any local contact, it's really up to you whether you choose to kind of allow or to block it. For the purposes of this, we'll block it. And printing of organisational data, again, we would probably look to block it. One thing that's worth bearing in mind is restricting web content transfer with other applications. So what we would recommend here is that you would use Microsoft Edge, the new Chromium version. What that means is if a user receives an email with a link as opposed to an attachment and they follow the link, you just ensure that the user is opening it up in a secure browser. MAM only really supports Microsoft Edge, but that would be the absolutely recommended browser to use. So for PIN access, we would then put a secondary authentication on the application itself, and we would always require that that PIN has an additional level of authentication. In the event the user was to leave their phone handset unlocked and somebody picked it up and they tried to open one of the apps, actually they would be re-prompted for an additional access. So we would leave that as required. We'd leave that as numeric, and a simple PIN would be allowed. Again, you can change that from 4 to 6, whatever works. Allow Touch ID or biometrics, and follow the defaults on required. There's nothing here that I would necessarily recommend changing, and I would just, with the only exception be work or school account credentials is required for access. Okay, so follow all of those. The thing to look here, again, generally would leave the app condition defaults as they are. The only thing to note is obviously jailbroken and rooted devices are block access. We would always recommend on an OS version, this particular one is for iOS, of doing 11.0 as a good recommendation. Anything that doesn't meet those requirements, you would then block access to that. That just makes sure that you're making sure that the user's device is actually of a suitable standard. Click next. Select groups to include, and we would be including our 365 security man group. We select that one, and select groups to exclude, and we'll set the 365 security man by class group. So if we select that and push next, And basically that's the policy created. You do get the opportunity to obviously review the policy before you create it, but we've followed through a lot of the kind of the defaults on there and what we'd say is good recommendations, and then create your man policy. And this is the policy for iOS devices.